Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates spent weekends at the mall, she was in her grandfather's backyard learning to handle his old hunting rifle. Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, had taught her that respect for firearms came through understanding and skill, not fear. At 22, Sarah worked as a mechanical engineer at a defense contractor near the naval base. Her colleagues knew her as the quiet woman who solved complex problems and never backed down from a challenge. What they didn't know was that she spent every weekend at the local shooting range, perfecting her marksmanship skills. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Sarah was reviewing blueprints in the company cafeteria when she overheard a conversation at the next table. 3 Navy SEALs in civilian clothes were discussing their upcoming training exercise. Lieutenant Commander Jake Thompson was explaining to his teammates how they would be testing new equipment at the range that afternoon. The brass wants to see if this new scope system actually improves accuracy, Jake said, taking a bite of his sandwich. Personally, I think it's just another fancy gadget that won't make much difference. A good shooter doesn't need all these electronics. His teammate, Petty Officer First Class Mike Rodriguez, nodded in agreement. Remember when that civilian contractor tried to show us how to use their targeting system last month? Guy couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, but he wanted to teach us about precision shooting. The 3rd SEAL, Chief Petty Officer Dan Williams, laughed. These contractor types think they know everything about warfare because they design equipment. They have no idea what it's like to actually use this stuff in real situations. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with frustration. She had designed several components for military equipment, and she knew her work was solid. More importantly, she knew she could outshoot most people. But these men had dismissed civilian contractors without knowing anything about their actual abilities. Unable to contain herself, Sarah stood up and walked over to their table. The 3 SEALs looked up in surprise as the petite brunette approached them with determination in her eyes. "Excuse me," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about the shooting exercise this afternoon. I'm Sarah Martinez, and I work on military equipment design here at the company." Lieutenant Commander Thompson looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and mild amusement. "Nice to meet you, Miss Martinez. Is there something we can help you with?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I heard you talking about civilian contractors and their shooting abilities. I was wondering if I could join your exercise this afternoon. I'd like to test the new equipment alongside your team." The 3 SEALs exchanged glances, and Mike Rodriguez barely suppressed a chuckle. Jake Thompson's expression shifted to one of polite but obvious skepticism. "Ma'am, with all due respect," Jake said, trying to maintain a professional tone, "this is a military training exercise. We're testing equipment under combat simulation conditions. It's not really appropriate for civilian personnel to participate." Sarah felt her determination growing stronger. "I understand your concerns, but I'm the lead engineer on the optical system you're testing. I know the equipment better than anyone. Besides, wouldn't it be valuable to get feedback from someone who understands both the technical aspects and the practical application?" Dan Williams leaned back in his chair, a condescending smile spreading across his face. "Look, Miss Martinez, I'm sure you're very good at your job, but shooting paper targets at a civilian range is completely different from what we do. These exercises are designed for military personnel who have years of combat training." The dismissive tone in his voice made Sarah's jaw clench. She had dealt with this attitude her entire career. Men who assumed that because she was a woman and a civilian, she couldn't possibly understand their world. "I appreciate your concern," Sarah replied, her voice remaining calm but gaining an edge of steel. "But I think you might be surprised by what this civilian contractor can do. I'm not asking to participate in your combat simulation. I'm simply requesting the opportunity to test the equipment I helped design." Jake Thompson looked at his watch and then back at Sarah. Something in her tone made him reconsider his initial dismissal. There was a confidence in her voice that suggested she wasn't just making an empty boast. "Tell you what," he said finally, "we're heading to the range at 1400 hours. If you can get clearance from your supervisor and the range officer, you can observe the testing. Maybe you can even take a few shots to see how your equipment performs." Sarah smiled, but it wasn't the grateful smile Jake expected. It was the smile of someone who had just gotten exactly what she wanted. "I'll be there," she said simply. "And Lieutenant Commander Thompson, you might want to warm up before we start. I have a feeling this afternoon is going to be more interesting than you expect." As Sarah walked away, the three SEALs watched her go with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. Jake shook his head and turned back to his teammates. "What do you think the chances are that she actually shows up?" Mike asked. "Oh, she'll show up," Dan replied with a grin. "The question is how quickly she'll realize she's in over her head." "I almost feel bad for her." Jake Thompson wasn't so sure. There had been something in Sarah Martinez's eyes that reminded him of the look he'd seen in the faces of his best snipers. A quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly what you were capable of. But surely a civilian engineer, even one who worked on military equipment, couldn't compete with Navy SEALs. He was about to find out just how wrong that assumption could be. Word spread quickly through the naval base about the civilian engineer who had challenged the SEALs to a shooting competition. By the time Sarah arrived at the range that afternoon, a small crowd had gathered to witness what many expected to be an embarrassing display. Sarah walked across the parking lot carrying a sleek black case, her steel-toed boots crunching on the gravel. She wore simple khaki pants and a navy polo shirt with her company logo, looking more like she was heading to a business meeting than a shooting range. The contrast between her professional appearance and the military personnel in their tactical gear was striking. Lieutenant Commander Thompson was already at the range, supervising the setup of the new optical equipment. When he saw Sarah approaching, he walked over to meet her, his expression a mixture of respect and concern. "Miss Martinez, I have to admit I'm surprised to see you here. Are you sure about this? There's no shame in just observing the exercise." Sarah set down her case and looked directly at Jake. "I appreciate your concern, Lieutenant Commander, but I didn't come here to watch. I came here to show you what your new equipment can do in the right hands." Behind Jake, she could see the other SEALs setting up their stations. Mike Rodriguez was adjusting his rifle scope, while Dan Williams was checking his ammunition. Several other naval personnel had gathered around the observation area, clearly expecting entertainment. The range officer, a gruff master chief named Patterson, approached with a clipboard. "Ma'am, I need to verify your clearance and ensure you understand the safety protocols before we begin." Sarah spent the next 10 minutes going through the standard safety briefing, demonstrating her knowledge of proper handling procedures and range rules. Master Chief Patterson was impressed despite himself. This civilian clearly knew her way around firearms. "All right, people, listen up," Jake called out as he addressed the group. "Today we're testing the new Advanced Combat Optical Gunsight System. The exercise consists of 3 phases: precision shooting at various distances, rapid-fire accuracy, and low-light conditions. Each shooter will fire from the 100-yard, 300-yard, and 500-yard lines." He gestured toward Sarah. "Miss Martinez from the contractor team will be participating to provide technical feedback on the equipment performance. Standard scoring applies. Maximum points for center mass hits with deductions for anything outside the 8 ring. Dan Williams stepped forward, unable to resist making a comment. "Should we maybe start Miss Martinez at the 50-yard line? Just to be safe?" Sarah opened her case, revealing a custom-built precision rifle that immediately caught the attention of everyone present. The weapon was a work of art, a modified Remington 700 with a custom barrel, precision stock, and advanced trigger system. She had built it herself over the course of 2 years, selecting each component for maximum accuracy. "I think I'll start where everyone else starts," Sarah replied calmly as she began assembling her rifle. "After all, the equipment needs to be tested under the same conditions you'll use in the field." Mike Rodriguez whistled low as he examined Sarah's rifle. "That's some serious hardware you've got there." "Custom build?" "Every piece," Sarah confirmed. "I designed the stock myself and had it machined specifically for my shooting style. The barrel is hand-lapped and the trigger breaks at exactly 2 pounds. Jake Thompson found himself reassessing his initial judgment. This woman clearly knew her equipment, and the rifle she had brought was easily worth more than most SEALs made in a month. Someone didn't invest that kind of time and money unless they knew how to use it. The first phase began at the 100-yard line. Each shooter would fire 5 rounds for group measurement, followed by 10 rounds for score. Jake went first, demonstrating the smooth, practiced motions of an expert marksman. His shots clustered tightly in the 9 and 10 rings, earning approving nods from the observers. Mike Rodriguez followed with similar results, his years of sniper training evident in his consistent form and steady breathing. Dan Williams matched their performance, placing all his shots within a 2-inch group at center mass. Then it was Sarah's turn. The range fell silent as she took her position, adjusting the new optical sight with practiced efficiency. She had spent hours studying the technical specifications of the equipment, and she knew exactly how to optimize its performance. Sarah's breathing slowed as she settled into her shooting stance. Her grandfather had taught her that shooting was 90% mental, controlling your heartbeat, your breathing, your entire nervous system. The rifle became an extension of her body as she aligned the crosshairs with the target. The first shot broke with a crisp crack that echoed across the range. Through her spotting scope, Master Chief Patterson called out, "X-ring, dead center." Sarah worked through her 5-shot group with methodical precision. Each shot was fired after the same careful breathing pattern, the same gentle trigger squeeze, the same follow-through. When she finished, Patterson studied the target through his spotting scope for a long moment before speaking. "Group size measures 0.3 inches, he announced, his voice betraying his surprise. All 5 shots could be covered by a dime. The crowd of observers began murmuring among themselves. Jake Thompson felt his eyebrows raise involuntarily. A 0.3-inch group at 100 yards was exceptional shooting by any standard, and Sarah had just accomplished it with equipment she had never used before. Dan Williams shook his head in disbelief. "Must be beginner's luck. Let's see how she does when we move back to 300 yards. But Sarah was just getting started. As they moved to the longer distances, her confidence grew. She had spent countless hours practicing at these ranges, learning to read wind conditions and adjust for bullet drop. The new optical system was performing exactly as she had designed it to, providing clear target acquisition and precise ranging information. At the 300-yard line, Sarah's shots continued to cluster tightly in the center of the target. Her shooting position was textbook perfect, left elbow planted firmly, right shoulder pressed into the stock, cheek weld consistent from shot to shot. She looked like she had been doing this her entire life. Mike Rodriguez watched her shooting form with growing respect. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked during a break between strings. "My grandfather started teaching me when I was 8, Sarah replied as she cleaned her rifle barrel.
"He was a Marine sniper in Vietnam."
"He always said that if you're going to do something, you might as well do it right." As they prepared for the final distance, Jake Thompson found himself genuinely curious about Sarah's performance. The 500-yard line would be the real test at that distance. Even small errors in technique or equipment would be magnified dramatically. The wind was picking up slightly, adding another variable to the equation. Sarah studied the flags along the range, noting the direction and intensity of the breeze. She made a small adjustment to her scope, compensating for the crosswind that would push her bullets slightly off course. The crowd had grown larger as word spread about the civilian, who was matching the SEALs shot for shot. Some of the observers were taking bets on whether she could maintain her performance at the longest distance. Sarah settled into her final shooting position, feeling the familiar calm that came over her when everything was perfectly aligned. The target seemed impossibly small at 500 yards, but through the new optical sight she could clearly see the aiming point. This was the moment that would prove whether her equipment design was truly superior, and whether she belonged on the same range as America's elite warriors. The 500-yard line represented the moment of truth. At this distance, the slightest error in breathing, trigger control, or wind reading would send bullets far from their intended target. The crowd of military personnel had grown to nearly 30 people, all waiting to see if the civilian engineer could maintain her incredible performance. Sarah took her time setting up for the long-range shots. She adjusted her rifle's bipod legs to ensure perfect stability, checked her scope settings, and studied the wind flags one more time. The breeze had shifted slightly, now coming from her left at approximately 8 miles per hour. Lieutenant Commander Thompson watched her preparations with growing amazement. Everything about Sarah's technique spoke of years of dedicated practice. Her movements were economical and precise, wasting no motion as she prepared for each shot. "You know," Jake said quietly to Mike Rodriguez, "I'm starting to think we might have underestimated Miss Martinez." Mike nodded, still watching Sarah's methodical setup. "That's military-grade precision she's showing. I've seen Marine snipers with less attention to detail." Dan Williams remained skeptical, though his confidence was beginning to waver. It's one thing to shoot well at a controlled range on a calm day. Real-world conditions are completely different. There are stress factors she's never experienced. Sarah settled behind her rifle and began her breathing cycle. In through the nose, hold for 3 seconds, out through the mouth. Her heart rate slowed as she entered the zone of perfect concentration that her grandfather had taught her to find. The first shot at 500 yards broke with the same crisp precision as all the others. Master Chief Patterson's voice carried clearly across the range. 10 ring, 11 o'clock. Sarah made a minute adjustment to compensate for the wind drift she had observed, then fired her second shot. X ring, dead center, Patterson called out. Shot after shot, Sarah continued to place her bullets exactly where she intended them to go. Her shooting rhythm was hypnotic, the same breathing pattern, the same trigger squeeze, the same follow-through every time. She looked like a machine designed specifically for precision shooting. The crowd of observers had fallen completely silent. Even the most experienced shooters among them recognized that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Jake Thompson found himself leaning forward, genuinely invested in Sarah's performance. When Sarah finished her final shot at 500 yards, Master Chief Patterson took an unusually long time studying the target through his spotting scope. Finally, he lowered the scope and turned to face the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patterson announced, his voice carrying a note of disbelief, "Miss Martinez has just fired a perfect score at 500 yards. 10 shots, all in the X-ring or better. Group size measures 2.1 inches. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, Mike Rodriguez began to clap. The applause spread through the crowd as the reality of what they had just witnessed sank in. A civilian contractor had not only matched the performance of Navy SEALs, she had exceeded it. Dan Williams stared at the target in shock. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Nobody shoots that well on their first time with new equipment." Sarah stood up from her shooting position and began cleaning her rifle with the same methodical precision she had shown throughout the exercise. She seemed almost oblivious to the amazement of the crowd around her. Jake Thompson approached her, his expression a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Miss Martinez, that was absolutely incredible shooting. Where did you learn to perform at that level?" Sarah looked up from her rifle cleaning kit. "Mostly from my grandfather, like I mentioned. But I've also been competing in precision shooting competitions for the past 8 years. I hold several state records in long-range categories." The revelation hit Jake like a physical blow. State records. This woman wasn't just a good recreational shooter. She was a champion-level competitor who had been hiding her abilities behind a modest job title. "Why didn't you mention that before?" Mike Rodriguez asked, still shaking his head in amazement. Sarah shrugged. "You didn't ask. Besides, I thought it would be more interesting to let my shooting speak for itself." Master Chief Patterson walked over carrying the score sheets from all 4 shooters. His expression was one of professional admiration, mixed with slight embarrassment at having initially doubted Sarah's abilities. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology," Patterson said. "In 30 years of running military shooting exercises, I've rarely seen performance like that. Your total score exceeds our best team results by a significant margin." The numbers on the score sheet told the complete story. Sarah had not only outshot the 3 SEALs individually, she had beaten their combined team score. Her precision at every distance had been consistently superior to some of America's most elite warriors. Dan Williams finally approached Sarah, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine respect. "Miss Martinez, I need to apologize for my comments earlier. I was completely out of line, and you've proven me wrong in the most decisive way possible." Sarah accepted his apology with grace. "No offense taken, Chief Williams. I understand why you were skeptical. Most people don't expect an engineer to be able to compete with military professionals, Jake." Thompson realized that the afternoon had taught him more than just the capabilities of new equipment. It had reminded him never to judge people based on their appearance or job title. This quiet engineer had just delivered a masterclass in precision shooting. "Miss Martinez," Jake said, "would you be interested in providing some advanced marksmanship training for our team? Based on what I've seen today, I think we could learn a lot from your techniques." Sarah smiled as she closed her rifle case. "I'd be honored, Lieutenant Commander. But first, let me ask you something. Are you ready to admit that civilian contractors might know a thing or two about the equipment we designed for you?" Jake laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd had all day. "Point taken. And yes, I think it's safe to say that our assumptions about civilian expertise might need some serious revision." As the crowd began to disperse, word of Sarah's incredible performance was already spreading throughout the base. The story of the engineer who had outshot an entire SEAL team would become legendary. But for Sarah, It was just another afternoon at the range. She had proven her point about the equipment's capabilities, but more importantly, she had earned the respect of some of the military's finest marksmen. The quiet engineer had found her voice, and it spoke with the authority of perfect precision. News of Sarah's extraordinary performance spread through the naval base like wildfire. By the next morning, her desk was flooded with emails from military personnel requesting training sessions, equipment consultations, and shooting demonstrations. The quiet engineer who had worked in relative anonymity for 3 years suddenly found herself at the center of attention. Colonel Marcus Webb, the base commander, had heard about the previous day's events and requested a meeting with Sarah. She sat in his office that Thursday morning, still somewhat overwhelmed by the sudden recognition her shooting skills had brought. "Miss Martinez," Colonel Webb began, "I've received several reports about your performance yesterday. Lieutenant Commander Thompson tells me you not only matched our best shooters, but significantly exceeded their scores. Is that accurate?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir. The new optical system performed exactly as designed, and I was able to demonstrate its full capabilities." Colonel Webb leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah with interest. "Tell me about your background. How does a mechanical engineer become skilled enough to outshoot Navy SEALs?" Sarah explained her childhood training with her grandfather, her years of competition shooting, and her dedication to understanding both the technical and practical aspects of firearms. As she spoke, Colonel Webb's respect for her accomplishments grew. "Miss Martinez, I have a proposition for you. We're hosting an inter-service marksmanship competition next month. Teams from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines will be competing. Would you be interested in serving as a civilian advisor and participating in the demonstration events?" Sarah felt her heart race with excitement. An inter-service competition would bring together the best military shooters from all branches. It would be an opportunity to test her skills against the absolute elite. "I would be honored, Colonel Webb. What would my role involve?" "You would work with our team to optimize their equipment and techniques. Additionally, you would participate in a special civilian demonstration category that we're adding to showcase the capabilities of our contractor partnerships." As Sarah left the colonel's office, she realized her life was about to change dramatically. The quiet engineer who had worked behind the scenes was stepping into a much more visible role. Over the following weeks, Sarah threw herself into preparation for the competition. She worked closely with the base's shooting team, sharing techniques she had learned from years of competition and helping them optimize their equipment setups. Lieutenant Commander Thompson became one of her most dedicated students. During their training sessions, he was amazed by the depth of Sarah's knowledge about ballistics, wind reading, and precision shooting techniques. "You know more about long-range shooting than most of our military instructors," Jake admitted during one afternoon session. "Where did you learn about atmospheric pressure effects on bullet trajectory?" Sarah smiled as she adjusted his scope settings. "When you're competing at the state and national level, you have to understand every variable that affects accuracy. I've spent hundreds of hours studying ballistics tables and testing different ammunition loads." The training sessions revealed that Sarah's expertise went far beyond just pulling the trigger accurately. She understood the science behind precision shooting at a level that impressed even the most experienced military marksman. Mike Rodriguez, who had initially been skeptical of civilian involvement, became one of Sarah's strongest supporters. "She's taught me more about reading wind conditions in 2 weeks than I learned in 5 years of sniper school," he told his teammates. Dan Williams had undergone a complete transformation in his attitude. The man who had initially dismissed Sarah as an unqualified civilian now sought her advice on equipment modifications and shooting techniques. "I owe you more than just an apology," Dan told Sarah after a particularly productive training session. "You've made me a better shooter, and more importantly, you've taught me not to judge people before I know what they're capable of." As the competition date approached, Sarah faced a new challenge. The media had gotten wind of the story about the civilian engineer who had outshot military specialists, and reporters were requesting interviews. Sarah, who had always preferred to work behind the scenes, found herself thrust into an unfamiliar spotlight. The attention brought both opportunities and pressures. Several shooting equipment manufacturers approached her about endorsement deals, and competitive shooting organizations invited her to join their professional teams. However, Sarah remained focused on her primary goal, proving that civilian contractors could contribute meaningfully to military effectiveness. The week before the competition, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Her grandfather, now in his 70s, drove down from his ranch to see her prepare for the biggest shooting event of her career. "I heard my granddaughter was making quite a name for herself," he said with a proud smile as he watched her practice at the range. "I learned from the best," Sarah replied, giving him a hug. "Everything I know about shooting I learned from you." Her grandfather watched her fire a practice string, noting the perfect consistency of her technique. "You've gone far beyond what I taught you, Sarah. You've taken those basic skills and turned them into something truly exceptional." That evening, as they sat on the porch of Sarah's apartment, her grandfather shared stories about his own military service and the respect he had earned through competence and dedication, rather than rank or titles. "The military is a place where performance matters more than anything else," he told her. "You've earned their respect the same way I did, by proving you're the best at what you do." The night before the competition, Sarah lay awake thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. From a young girl learning to shoot tin cans in her grandfather's backyard, to a respected marksmanship expert preparing to compete against the nation's elite shooters, she had come further than she had ever imagined possible. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Lieutenant Commander Thompson. "Remember, tomorrow isn't just about winning. It's about showing everyone what's possible when we judge people by their abilities rather than their assumptions. You've already won where it matters most." Sarah smiled and set her phone aside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but she was ready. She had spent her entire life preparing for moments like this. Moments when skill, preparation, and determination would be put to the ultimate test. The quiet engineer was about to step onto the biggest stage of her career, carrying with her the hopes of everyone who had ever been underestimated because of their background or appearance. Tomorrow she would let her shooting do the talking once again. The morning of the inter-service competition dawned clear and still, perfect conditions for precision shooting. Sarah arrived at the expanded range facility 2 hours before the scheduled start time, wanting to familiarize herself with the competition layout and wind conditions. The event had grown far beyond its original scope. What started as a routine military marksmanship competition had attracted attention from defense contractors, military leadership, and shooting sports organizations. News crews were setting up equipment to cover the story of the civilian engineer who had challenged military assumptions about expertise. Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her as she walked the range. The pressure and media attention faded into background noise when she focused on the technical aspects of the competition. Wind flags, target distances, shooting positions, these were the elements that mattered. Lieutenant Commander Thompson found her studying the 800-yard targets through a spotting scope. "How are you feeling about today?" he asked. Sarah lowered the scope and smiled. "Confident. The conditions are excellent and I've had good preparation time. How's the team feeling?" "They're ready. Your training has made a significant difference in their performance. Mike's precision shooting has improved by 20%, and Dan's confidence with the new equipment is much higher." The competition format included individual and team events across multiple distances and shooting positions. Sarah would compete in the civilian demonstration category, which had been structured to directly compare her performance against the military team's results. As the competitors gathered for the opening ceremony, Sarah noticed the variety of shooting talent assembled: Army snipers, Marine marksmen, Navy SEALs, and Air Force security forces. Each branch had sent their finest shooters to represent their service. Colonel Webb addressed the gathered participants and spectators. "Today's competition represents more than just marksmanship skills. It demonstrates the partnership between our military forces and the civilian experts who support our mission. Ms. Martinez exemplifies the dedication and expertise that our contractor partners bring to national defense." The first event was precision shooting at 300 yards from the prone position. Sarah watched the military competitors carefully, noting their techniques and equipment setups. These were clearly elite shooters, and their performance reflected years of professional training. When Sarah's turn came, the range fell quiet. The story of her previous performance had spread throughout the military shooting community, and everyone wanted to see if she could repeat her extraordinary accuracy under competition pressure. Sarah settled into her shooting position with practiced ease. The familiar weight of her custom rifle felt reassuring as she aligned her sight picture with the target. Her breathing slowed to the rhythm she had perfected through thousands of practice rounds. The first shot broke cleanly, and the target monitor displayed an X-ring hit. Sarah continued through her string of fire with mechanical precision, each shot following the same perfect process. When she finished, the electronic scoring system showed a perfect score, all 10 shots in the X-ring. Murmurs of amazement rippled through the crowd of spectators. Several military shooters shook their heads in disbelief, while others nodded with professional respect for what they had witnessed. The competition continued through multiple events, and Sarah's performance remained consistently exceptional. At 500 yards, she again achieved a perfect score. At 600 yards, she outshot every military competitor by a significant margin. By the time they reached the 800-yard long-range event, the outcome was no longer in doubt. Master Sergeant Rodriguez from the Army Marksmanship Team approached Sarah during a break between events. "Ma'am, I've been shooting competitively for 15 years and I've never seen consistency like yours. What's your secret?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I think it's the combination of understanding the technical side and maintaining absolute focus on fundamentals. Every shot gets the same attention to detail, whether it's the first one or the 100th. The final event was a challenging rapid-fire accuracy test that required shooters to engage multiple targets at varying distances within strict time limits. This event was designed to simulate combat conditions and test both accuracy and speed. Sarah had practiced this type of shooting extensively in her competitive career, but never under the intense scrutiny she faced today. Media cameras followed her every movement as she prepared for the final challenge. The course of fire required shooters to engage 5 targets at distances from 200 to 600 yards within 90 seconds. Points were awarded for both speed and accuracy, with penalties for missed shots or overtime. When the start signal sounded, Sarah moved through the course with fluid efficiency. Her transitions between targets were smooth and fast, but she never sacrificed accuracy for speed. Each shot was deliberate and controlled, despite the time pressure. The electronic timing system showed that Sarah had completed the course in 73 seconds, well under the time limit. More importantly, she had achieved hits on all 5 targets with precision that exceeded the performance of every military competitor. As the final scores were tallied, the magnitude of Sarah's achievement became clear. She had not only won the civilian demonstration category, she had posted the highest overall scores in every single event. Her combined performance exceeded the best military team's total by more than 15%. The awards ceremony took place as the sun began to set over the range. Sarah stood on the platform, holding a trophy that recognized her as the competition's top overall performer. But more meaningful than any award was the respect she saw in the faces of the military personnel who had initially doubted her abilities. Colonel Webb presented Sarah with a special recognition from the base command. "Miss Martinez, your performance today has redefined our understanding of civilian expertise. You have earned the respect and admiration of every military professional present." Lieutenant Commander Thompson stepped forward to add his own comments. "Sarah has taught us that expertise comes from dedication and skill, not from uniforms or job titles. She has made us all better shooters and better professionals." As the ceremony concluded, Sarah was surrounded by military personnel seeking to learn from her techniques and approach. The conversation had shifted completely from skepticism about civilian capabilities to genuine interest in learning from her expertise. Dan Williams, who had been most vocal in his initial dismissal of Sarah's abilities, approached her with genuine humility. "Miss Martinez, I hope you'll accept my invitation to conduct advanced training with our special operations teams. We clearly have a lot to learn from your methods." Sarah looked out over the range where she had just achieved the greatest competitive victory of her career. But the real victory wasn't measured in scores or trophies. It was the change in attitude she had inspired. The barriers between military and civilian expertise had been broken down through pure demonstration of skill and dedication. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. But tonight, Sarah Martinez could reflect on having proven that excellence recognizes no boundaries of rank, uniform, or job description. The weeks following the inter-service competition transformed Sarah's career in ways she never could have anticipated. Her phone rang constantly with requests from military units, law enforcement agencies, and competitive shooting organizations. The quiet engineer had become the most sought-after marksmanship instructor in the country. The Department of Defense offered Sarah a consulting contract to develop advanced training programs for military snipers. The opportunity would allow her to work directly with special operations units while maintaining her engineering position with the defense contractor. Sarah accepted the dual role, recognizing it as a chance to bridge the gap between technical innovation and practical application. Her first assignment was to work with a Marine Corps reconnaissance unit that was struggling with accuracy issues on their new sniper rifles. Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Hayes, the unit's senior instructor, had initially been skeptical about working with a civilian consultant. "We've been training snipers for 20 years, she told Sarah during their first meeting. "I'm not sure what an engineer can teach us about combat shooting." Sarah smiled, recognizing the familiar challenge. "Sergeant Hayes, I'm not here to replace your training methods. I'm here to help you optimize the technical aspects of your equipment and identify any factors that might be affecting accuracy." Over the next 3 days, Sarah worked closely with the Marine snipers, observing their techniques and analyzing their equipment performance. She quickly identified several issues that were contributing to their accuracy problems. "Your scope mounting system is allowing slight movement under recoil," Sarah explained to Sergeant Hayes. "It's only a few thousandths of an inch, but at 800 yards that translates to several inches of error." Sarah also noticed that the Marines were using ammunition that wasn't optimally matched to their rifle barrels. She spent an afternoon helping them test different loads to find the most accurate combinations for each individual weapon. The improvements were immediate and dramatic. Within a week, the unit's qualification scores had improved by 30%, and their confidence in their equipment was completely restored. Sergeant Hayes approached Sarah on the final day of the consultation with a newfound respect. "I owe you an apology, Miss Martinez. I didn't think a civilian could understand the pressures and requirements of military shooting. You've proven me wrong and made us all better at our jobs." Word of Sarah's success with the Marine unit spread quickly through military channels. Soon she was receiving requests from Army Ranger battalions, Navy SEAL teams, and Air Force Special Tactics squadrons. Each unit presented unique challenges and learning opportunities. Working with the Rangers, Sarah helped develop new techniques for shooting from unconventional positions and extreme angles. The SEALs were interested in her expertise with maritime environments and the effects of salt air on equipment precision. The Air Force wanted to understand high-altitude shooting considerations. Each assignment taught Sarah something new about the practical application of marksmanship skills. She began to see patterns in the challenges faced by different units and started developing standardized solutions that could be applied across multiple organizations. Sarah's reputation extended beyond the military community. The Federal Bureau of Investigation requested her assistance with their sniper training program, and several police departments sought her help with SWAT team marksmanship development. The civilian competitive shooting world also embraced Sarah's expertise. She was invited to serve as a coach for the U.S. National Shooting Team and to conduct seminars at major shooting competitions across the country, balancing all these responsibilities while maintaining her engineering work required careful time management. But Sarah found the variety energizing. Each day brought new technical challenges and opportunities to share her knowledge with dedicated professionals. One of her most rewarding assignments came from an unexpected source. The Department of Veterans Affairs asked Sarah to work with disabled veterans who were interested in competitive shooting as part of their rehabilitation programs. Staff Sergeant Kevin Morrison had lost his left leg in Afghanistan and was struggling to adapt his shooting techniques to his new physical limitations. Sarah worked with him to develop modified shooting positions and equipment configurations that accommodated his prosthetic limb. "I thought my competitive shooting days were over," Kevin told Sarah after achieving his first high scores since his injury. "You've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever." The Veterans Program became one of Sarah's most passionate projects. She developed specialized training protocols for shooters with various disabilities and worked with equipment manufacturers to create adaptive devices that improved accessibility. Sarah's influence extended to equipment development as well. Manufacturers began consulting with her during the design phase of new optics and rifle systems. Her combination of technical knowledge and practical shooting experience provided insights that improved product performance significantly. The optical sight system that had started her journey to recognition was refined based on her feedback and became the standard for multiple military services. Sarah's engineering improvements and user experience recommendations resulted in a 20% improvement in accuracy across all shooting platforms. Media attention continued to follow. Sarah's career development. She was featured in military publications, engineering journals, and shooting sports magazines. Interview requests came from television networks and documentary filmmakers interested in her unique story. Despite the recognition and opportunities, Sarah remained grounded in her original motivation, proving that expertise could come from unexpected sources and that collaboration between different communities produced better results than isolation. Lieutenant Commander Thompson, who had become a close friend and professional colleague, often marveled at the transformation Sarah had brought to military attitudes about civilian expertise. "You've changed how we think about partnerships," Jake told her during one of their regular training sessions. "The walls between military and civilian professionals have come down, and everyone is benefiting from the increased collaboration." Sarah's calendar was booked months in advance with training engagements, equipment consultations, and competitive events. She had evolved from a behind-the-scenes engineer to a recognized expert whose opinions shaped policy and practice across multiple organizations. That the quiet woman who had once been dismissed by military professionals now found herself at the center of a revolution in thinking about expertise, collaboration, and the value of diverse perspectives in achieving excellence. As Sarah packed her equipment after another successful training session, she reflected on how far she had come from that day in the company cafeteria when she had overheard the SEALs discussing civilian contractors. The journey had exceeded her wildest expectations, but she knew it was just the beginning of what could be accomplished when people set aside assumptions and focused on shared goals. 2 years after her first encounter with the Navy SEALs, Sarah Martinez found herself standing before a packed auditorium at the National Defense University, delivering the keynote address at the annual Military-Civilian Partnership Conference. The woman who had once been dismissed as just another contractor was now recognized as a leading expert in precision marksmanship and military-civilian collaboration. The audience included senior military officers, defense contractors, government officials, and academic researchers. Sarah looked out at the crowd and saw familiar faces. Lieutenant Commander Thompson, now promoted to full commander, sat in the front row alongside Colonel Webb, who had become a strong advocate for civilian expertise integration. 3 years ago, Sarah began, a Navy SEAL laughed when I asked to participate in a shooting exercise. Today, that same SEAL and I are partners in developing training programs that have improved military marksmanship scores by an average of 25% across all services. The audience listened intently as Sarah described her journey, from anonymous engineer to recognized expert. But her focus wasn't on personal achievement. It was on the broader lessons learned about breaking down barriers between different professional communities. "The real victory wasn't my shooting scores," Sarah continued. "It was the moment when military professionals realized that expertise exists in unexpected places, and that collaboration produces better results than isolation." Sarah's presentation included data from the numerous training programs she had developed over the past 2 years. Military units that had participated in her integrated training showed consistent improvements in accuracy, equipment reliability, and overall mission readiness. The success of her programs had led to the establishment of the Integrated Marksmanship Training Center, a joint military-civilian facility where Sarah served as technical director. The center brought together military instructors, civilian experts, equipment manufacturers, and researchers to develop cutting-edge training methods. One of the center's most successful innovations was the mentorship program that paired experienced civilian competitive shooters with military marksmen. The program had produced remarkable results, with participating military units achieving record-high qualification scores. Master Chief Patterson, who had observed Sarah's first shooting demonstration, now served as the center's military liaison. Miss Martinez didn't just prove that civilians could compete with military shooters, he told the audience during a panel discussion. She showed us that different perspectives and experiences make everyone better. The center had also become a testing ground for new equipment and technologies. Sarah's engineering background allowed her to evaluate technical innovations from both performance and practical application standpoints. Her recommendations had influenced the development of several pieces of equipment that were now standard issue across multiple military services. Sarah's influence extended to policy development as well. The Department of Defense had adopted new guidelines for civilian contractor integration that were based largely on the successful model she had established. The guidelines emphasized the importance of evaluating people based on demonstrated competence rather than background assumptions. During the question and answer session following her presentation, a young Army officer asked Sarah about overcoming skepticism and resistance when trying to establish credibility in a new environment. "The most important thing is to let your work speak for itself," Sarah replied. "Don't try to argue your way to credibility. Demonstrate it through consistent performance and genuine expertise. Respect is earned through competence, not claimed through credentials." Sarah's advice reflected lessons learned from dozens of challenging assignments where she had faced initial skepticism. Each successful project had built her reputation and opened doors to new opportunities, creating a positive cycle of achievement and recognition. The conference also highlighted the broader impact of Sarah's work on military culture. Several senior officers spoke about how the integration of civilian expertise had improved not just shooting skills, but overall attitudes toward collaboration and learning from diverse sources. General Patricia Williams, the commanding officer of the Special Operations Command, addressed the audience about the strategic value of the military-civilian partnerships that Sarah had helped pioneer. "Ms. Martinez has taught us that innovation comes from bringing together different perspectives and experiences," General Williams said. "The programs she has developed have not only improved our tactical capabilities, but have also strengthened our relationships with the civilian community that supports our mission." After the conference, Sarah was approached by representatives from several international military organizations. Her reputation had spread beyond the United States, and foreign allies were interested in implementing similar collaboration programs. The Royal Canadian Army invited Sarah to develop a training program for their sniper school. The Australian Defence Force requested her assistance with equipment evaluation and selection. The British Special Air Service wanted to explore integration of civilian competitive shooting techniques into their training curriculum. Each international opportunity represented a chance to further prove that the collaborative model she had developed could be successfully adapted to different military cultures and organizational structures. Sarah's grandfather, now in his mid-70s, attended the conference as her special guest. Watching his granddaughter receive recognition from the highest levels of military leadership filled him with pride that went beyond her shooting achievements. "You've done something more important than winning competitions," he told Sarah during a quiet moment between sessions. "You've changed how people think about what's possible when they work together instead of against each other." The weekend following the conference, Sarah returned to the shooting range where her journey had begun. Commander Thompson joined her for their regular training session, a tradition they had maintained despite their busy schedules. As they set up their equipment at the 500-yard line, Jake reflected on the transformation that had occurred since that first day when Sarah had challenged their assumptions. "You know what's funny?" Jake said as he adjusted his scope. "That first day we thought we were testing new equipment. We had no idea we were actually getting a lesson about the importance of keeping an open mind." Sarah smiled as she chambered her first round. "The equipment testing was just an excuse. I really wanted to prove that civilian contractors weren't the incompetent outsiders you thought we were." "Mission accomplished," Jake replied with a laugh. "Though I have to admit you went a bit overboard with the proof." As Sarah settled into her shooting position, she felt the same calm focus that had carried her through every challenge of the past 3 years. The target downrange looked familiar and achievable, just like it had that first day when she had decided to stop being invisible and start making a difference. The shot broke cleanly, and through the spotting scope, Jake called out the result that had become routine but never lost its satisfaction. X-ring, dead center. Sarah Martinez had proven that expertise recognizes no boundaries, that collaboration produces better results than competition, and that sometimes the biggest victories come from changing minds rather than winning games. The quiet engineer had found her voice and the world was listening.